what is that? Because once you untie that knot, the shift becomes easy. The shift becomes enjoyable. You start looking forward to the shift. Like, when is the shift about to occur? You start looking forward to it. Uh, and uh, and because there's a sense of hope and aspiration and inspiration that begins to arise when one can see light at the end of a tunnel. So we have to stretch our vision far, to see. Does that sort of answer your question? And maybe Jim might have something else to say about that. So here's this boy, right? And he has sort of like these, what we might call special abilities, or he has, you know um, in the Majima Nikaya, they call them supernormal powers. For 7 years, the boy had been with this yogi, and during the last 3 years, he had been the oracle at this monastery. That's what OK is. It's the name of a monastery. His rank was now greater than that of the abbot. So when we speak of rank as being greater, I mean his spiritual capacity, and therefore the resultant respect by virtue of the spiritual capacity was greater than than that of the abbot. And so as I was reading this, I thought I got a phone call from a former teacher. She's no longer a student. She's no longer my student. She's she's my master's student now, and she Harmony. Some of you may know her, and uh, she said, I've been uh, trying to connect with you and you're not getting it. So I just had to pick up the phone and call you. So, and Harmony, if any of you know Harmony, if I had been at Heartwood today, I had planned to show you a picture I have on my wall, because Harmony, I would tell her, um, that I would feel this great strength, for the things that I have to do. It has taken strength beyond what Panyawadi has to give, has to offer, to just be able to stand and go through some circumstances, or to try to walk out something that um, that I have envisioned, something that I've seen, and have a direction in which to go, but how to accomplish it. And I've needed a lot of strength. And I said I always feel like, there's some strength joining with me to help. And she said, "Yeah, I'll draw you a picture," and she drew me a picture of this huge being, and she said, "Everywhere you go, that being's always with you, whether it's a him or a her." Well, I cannot say, because they're not like gender oriented in that kind of way, but this big, kind of androgynous, and it's a fierce looking something too. It scared me. I'm like, okay, well, you could just stay there and prop my arms up, but I don't want to see you. And um, because we have our own things about what we can reasonably accommodate. And I remember Contact, the movie Contact, and when she was like, had slipped into this vortex or whatever, and that was when the time was lost on the earth side, and everybody, they hid it because they didn't want to scare everybody. um and she asked this guide that was walking with her, and telling her some things. She said, "Are you my father?" or something like that, because he appeared as her father. He said, "No, I'm just appearing in a form that's comfortable for you, you know, in a form that you can accommodate." And so, I remember reading, I think it's in the Avalokiteshvara, um, a sutta, where it talks about, if uh, if wisdom needs to appear as your father, it appears as your father. If it needs to appear as a hungry man on the street, I appear as a hungry man on the street to save living beings. If it needs to appear as a Christian pastor, I appear as a Christian pastor to free living beings. If you need to appear as a dog, I show up as a dog in your life. And so it's, and when we think of forms like that, what if we thought of ourselves like that, as a form of wisdom appearing? Oh my goodness, how would we conduct ourselves? How would we move in this world if we didn't think of ourselves as us? If I didn't think of myself as Panyawadi and you as Sister Suchness, but wisdom appearing in some form and having an encounter with that wisdom, and to see what wisdom is offering, a direct encounter. Actually, that's really kind of like what it is. That's what all the hindrances, the obstacles are. They're just layers of ignorance covering. But when you start peeling those off, when we talk about emptiness, it's talking about something like that. And so it appears in different ways, um, in our life, or as someone in our life. If we could get that, we'd see that every person is our teacher, and our teacher is ourself. And we'd be done with it. We'd just get on then with you know well, now that I'm here, until this conditionality this is finished, I'll just serve living beings. I'll just traipse through the world being happy and serving people. Uh, but what a different kind of life we could have if we thought that we were that, and that each other was that. What words though can we use to like take us towards that kind of view, or that kind of vision? The Buddha said it's like difficult, because our words are conceived in ignorance and walked out in ignorance. So he said, y'all don't have words for this. So we have to say it's something like this. We have to have analogies, and we to just kind of get the idea of something, you know. And that's why it takes us a while, because we already have firmly entrenched certain ideas of things. And each one of us having a different idea about the same thing, you know. And so it takes a lot in the condition that we now find ourselves in. So it's really a matter, do you really want to be free? And and it costs us something. It costs a certain kind of inner surrender, um, and we don't know it. We just think that there's something to get, and we just keep trying to get something, you see. And it's not really about getting something. But I want to stay focused, because I can go all over the map. I want to stay focused so I can turn this over to Jim. I'm trying to get to a point, and because I'm going to actually end uh, right there in one more comment. And so I was talking to Harmony, and she said, yeah, you're too busy. She said, and so I have to actually pick up the phone and call you. I can't connect with you the way I was trying to connect with you. She said, I wanted to tell you something. Now, you remember day before yesterday, I decided that I was just going to lay out the altar thing, right? And I gave you a little bit of the altar thing, right? Okay. And that night, well, that day when I got home and checked my emails, Master asked, could I get on a Zoom, because she was going to do, she had something important that she wanted to share. Y'all think I got in trouble, but I didn't. And so I had already said there's something I was not exactly, well, I was pretty sure I wasn't supposed to do, but sometimes better to ask for forgiveness than permission, right? Okay. And so I laid out the altar, I laid out the implements, what they symbolize. The first two, in being the good host, inviting a guest, and you're inviting guests. to the table of your heart, the greatest part of you, your innermost being, opening up and being receptive, right? uh, to compassionate wisdom, true streaming in, right? And then the other six represent our six sense gates, you know, um, by which we um, uh, make sense of our world, and there's sort of a and recognizing their limitations and insufficiency, and also how our perceptions are formed by this, what we see, hear, taste, touch, smell, and think. uh, and and so we're inviting this guest in, this great guest, and actually it's sort of like throwing our consciousnesses at their feet, offering them to this great Bodhi mind, that something like that. Now you see, that can be understood on many different levels, but if you just take the imagery of it, you get more the idea, around the attitude for being open and receptive, for wisdom to reveal itself. You can't open the doors of wisdom. Wisdom has to reveal itself, and for it to do that, there are certain conditions, and that's like the Dharma and the discipline, or the precepts and how we walk them out. It's the sila, of the platform of the sila and integrity in which we live our lives. It's how we step back and correct, and then take two more steps forward. It's how we live the life. It's that. And during the retreat, there was a couple of conversations about how we live the life, with um, integrity, and how we uh, self-correct, and not so much judging others, and not even judging ourselves, just like, oops, I stepped off the sidewalk, and or tiptoeing through the tulips, if you will, that you don't crush any of them. And so so I shared some things even more than that. And we know, if you were in that retreat, you know what those things were. Um, And then I get this email from Master saying, "Can you get on tonight?" And she goes through this uh, wonderfully simple yet profound teachings on the altar and the mantras and the mudras, you know, and with her uh, warnings about authorization of being authorized, because these are powerful tools, powerful implements. It's like, you don't give your child needs something to play with. You find a ball, you can find a piece of paper, a card, anything, but you don't give her matches. And so that's what she was talking about, giving matches to a child. And 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 they might accidentally strike it against the sulfur side, and they see this flames. That, oh, how beautiful! And next thing you know, they set themselves on fire. And so that's the power inherent in the combination of the sulfur, the matchstick, and the strike. But see, the strike is so important. This is just my analogy of it. The strike is so important. You can have the matchstick and you can have the sulfur all day long, harmless, 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 until it gets struck by a person who can't handle the fire, doesn't know what to do with fire, has no idea that it will set you ablaze. Or if you say the stove is on and the baby's going near the stove and he sees the pretty blue flame, and it starts reaching and says, "Don't touch, baby, hot, hot, fire will burn." Like, the child has no idea of the fire will burn, or what that means, what burn means. And so, in working with intense, I would call Vajrayana practice intense practice. And in working with the kind of intense practice like that, there are there are some dangers of bringing that matchstick and that sulfur together by one who may strike it without uh, uh, respecting its properties. I'll say it like that. Um, and so, okay, so now I'm at the end of her talk, and I'm saying, Master, when this is all over, there were some other of her disciples on. I said, could I have a one-on-one with you for a minute? Because now I already know. See, I already know she knows. Um, and so she says, "Oh yeah, we can have it right now." I said, "Well, no, I don't want to confuse people because it's a question for our sangha, and and I could tell that there were some others of her students that this is not an open conversation that should be had because they weren't, at a certain place in their practice." And so she says, "Okay." And so after everybody hangs up, and then she comes on, and I said, "Something you said confused me." And I related what that was. And she was talking about there's 7 layers, and I'm not getting into this today, but the 7 layers of tantric initiation, from the most subtle, which is buying a book out of the out of the bookstore that has mantras, mudras, and procedures in them, you know, and all the way to the greatest, which is called the state initiation, and that's where the yidam actually initiates. And before the yidam, it would be the master initiates, but a master who really has the power to activate something, not just a master who's got a title master, you know. Um, and then she talked a little bit about the 7 levels. And And so I said, "Well, um, I want to know what I can do." She said, "Oh, you could just go ahead, and do what you're going to do. Just know it's not going to benefit them that much because you did it." I said, "Okay, no problem. I'm okay with that." You know, so she says, but here's the thing. She says, the good news is that, and I'm not giving you permission to do anything. You understand that? I totally understand that. She said, but the good thing is that when they undertake it with sincerity and a desire for truth to be revealed, she said, then these other initiations, the inner tantric initiation, takes place because they become the catalyst for for their own unfoldment. And then she said, and then Buddha Master will come if their practice is deep enough and initiate them. And it took me thinking about that. I was halfway walking with Buddha Master. It took almost 15 years before I had a direct signal uh, uh, from him. So, but when you get it, you get it. You've gotten it. So a couple of pages over, he said, he said, um, now they say you must pray, you must meditate to find peace, to find freedom. So they meditate, but upon what? They just meditate upon an idea of peace, of freedom, and that binds them further. And without knowing how they are bound by what is in their minds and how it has been formulated, their meditations and their prayers are useless. When they do not know what causes separation, then unity, peace, freedom, or whatever name they give it, will merely be an idea. So part of what we're trying to do here, if you bear with us in this process and not keep saying, what are we doing here? Part of what we're doing is trying to separate, uh, or or maybe I should say, separate ourselves from the ideas of peace, from the idea of freedom, because once we think we know what that is, then we start trying to attain that, but it's just the idea of something, you see. But in our surrender, You know, we surrender our idea of what it is. So I'm just trying to shake us up a little bit, so that we start surrendering our ideas of what we think uh, things are. It says, and it says, there is only one way to freedom, and that is to show how one is bound. I cannot free you. You must do that for yourself. Only then will you find the mighty creative power that is behind all creation, the love and the wisdom that is beyond your mind. You know. So if I, instead of spending my time fixated on something that's negative happening and that I can't do anything about, what if I sat with something like that all day or all night or all day and all night? Just thinking on pondering that paragraph. What does that mean? And how do I employ it in my life? How do I enter into that? Do I even want to? I mean, just to thine own self be true. And and it says, yet your mind is the vehicle through which it will manifest. How can it manifest through a mind that is filled with all that which is false? You would be expressing your own conditioning. It says, it is for this that I have brought you here. Your mind must be made clear enough. And so, in the last paragraph on that page, so I'm saying, like, what binds you? We're trying to get to the Chan's teaching on empty mind, but some don't know what's in their mind, can't see what's in their mind, can't see when things are rising or when they're departing, can't see when they're grasping, can't see even when they're free of something, still thinking we're bound because we're tapping in the wrong place, looking in the wrong spot. That's why I have such an issue, with I don't know. I that's just my pet peeve. That's my defilement about the inner child thing. Okay, it's a um. So don't let it bother you. And if you're doing inner child work, go right ahead. Just whatever works for you, do that. Um, but I think that I like these approaches because they take me to the most compassionate part of me and also quickly to the wisest part. And at 70, I don't have that much time left. So I'm kind of like want the quick version. I can take it tough, I can take it rough. I need to overcome. And I'm always stripping away, not so many outer kinds of suffering, but still, some inner kinds of dukkha. He said, like, dukkha, maybe suffering wasn't the best word, but there is a basic kind of unsatisfactoriness with the best that life has to offer. I don't care how good it gets. Um, I've had, cars and houses and land and husbands and lovers and businesses and I don't care what it is. There's still, even when it was the best of the best, there was still something that this world, itch that the world couldn't scratch. There was still something. What is that? And so anyway, in talking with her, she and the reason I had introduced her to Zazi Rinpoche is because she did, in her path coming was a lot of work in other realms with other beings, and she's like on first name basis with all of those, like we're on a first name basis with each other, right? And so this is this constant engagement in these other realms. She said, you go back and you listen to what Master said in her opening statement, you know, and and I went back and I listened to it, and it changed something completely for me. But what she said was that Buddha Master said the uh, the altar is the portal between the realms. The altar is the portal between the realms. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I used to have altars all the time, and in the beginning of my practice, but now I don't do that. I just like kind of imagine in my head and in my heart, you know. And but there are actual physical dimensions as well. Um, she said, so that's what I called you to tell you. I've been trying to tell you. She said something's not right with your altar. She said, you're doing some of the things. She said, but number one, you're not spending enough time in front of it. I said, I'm busy. I said, but see, I was laughing. It is not a joking matter, but I was laughing the other day, day before yesterday, because I said, don't have any more altars than you want to keep clean, because I don't even clean the one I have. It's too elaborate. You got to move all those things. I need to go back to something simple. And then she went on to tell me about the water offerings, and we actually have 4 rows of 8 water offerings. So that's 8 things, to fill up, and there's a certain visualization you do. So I'm like, that's just too much. She said, you need to do it. She said, this is the bottom line for you at the level of initiation. Remember, I talked about the 7 levels of initiation. She said, you're not going to be able to use somebody else's proved weapons. You have to function at your own level. She said, so now this is a bit of laziness creeping in. You got to root that out. So, and when I'm calling other people lazy, just don't want to do your work and so forth, um, I'm calling myself out today, because I have a real resistance. I have a real resistance to this, but in my heart of hearts, I know that she's onto something. And I look, when something rises up in you, then you get a confirmation from this place. Then you get a confirmation from that place. And they didn't even have to confirm it because you already knew, but you just don't feel like putting forth the effort to do that, you know. Um, and so, but that's the wonderfulness of good friends in the Dharma, whether they are in these gross, dense bodies or whether they're in fine material bodies. And and once things get to that place, one time somebody said to Buddha Master, you came to me in my dream. He said, so what? He said, I've got tens of thousands of disciples. You think I can traipse all over the world to see him? It was like, what kind of master would I be if I had to do that? And so he was like, that's no big deal, you know. And so I say opening yourself up will give you some inspiration and sometimes a little kick in the butt at some of the things that you need to do for yourself. I'm not telling anybody to do anything that I do. I'm just opening up and letting people know how one treads the path for themselves. So now I'd like to introduce Dr. Jim Norris. And some of you may have tuned in when he shared some of the inspiration that he's gotten from 3 divine messengers um, that uh, introduced themselves to him and have been guiding him. And I mean that this is a very educated man, not only educated, one who works with folks who have mental issues. Okay. So he knows something about things, and now he's in this space, in this realm where this incredible wisdom is flowing, is flowing out of him. And it came into his life in like the most extraordinary way, and even through a lot of pain and suffering. Uh, and and I wanted to ask him to share as a real live living person, you know, um, what he does with that on a daily basis, so that we know how to open up to receive messengers, to we open up to be able to understand what we take in, so that it goes just beyond be penetrates deeper than our intellect, and that we can activate the wisdom that comes and make it alive and living in us. And so, Jim.
Thank you, Venerable Panyawati. Can everybody hear? Thank you. Most of you may have been at the talk that I gave January of this year on my experience and how it came about. So I'm going to give a very abbreviated version of that. What it consisted of is that I took a fall on the asphalt while shoveling snow. And some people say that they have to be hit over the head with a 2x4. I had to be hit over the head with a driveway to begin my process. I had a slow bleed in my brain that didn't manifest fully until March of this year. And I went into the hospital. I had to have emergency neurosurgery. And the first emergency surgery went fine, but there were some complications, and I had to have another one. And during that process, I did not regain consciousness, and it was kind of iffy whether I would be returning to the earth or not. I did, and I was completely paralyzed on my right side. It was a subdural hematoma. It wasn't a stroke per se. And I couldn't speak. I was on a ventilator. And as all of that began to slowly resolve, I was in the hospital and rehab for a total of 5 weeks. And what was strange about it is that rather than being in a depressed place or an anxious place about how compromised I was in a state of bliss. And it was like everything that was happening was supposed to be happening. There was nothing wrong with any of it. And when someone would come in to do something like take vital signs in the middle of the night when I was sleeping, rather than being irritated by that, I felt the blessing of the person's attention, and silently would offer them a blessing and gratitude in return, sometimes not silently. I did thank them for their attention. So you get the idea. It was really the most beautiful experience I've ever had. And there was one point where I began to feel a presence in the room. And you've all probably had the experience of knowing that somebody is looking at you. It was like that, except without the creepy feeling. It was very benign and very supportive feeling. And Judith, my wife, who is here today, recommended that I start doing some journaling as best I could. I was regaining the use of my right hand, and what I could do journaling with was the trusty iPhone and the Pages app. So I began journaling, and I started to do a process that I had learned before when I was in analysis called active imagination, which is a technique that Jung made use of in working with dreams. Rather than just trying to interpret a dream or understand it, he would have his patients engage in dialogues with dream characters. So you might ask, a bear that showed up in your dream, why are you in my dream? What do you want from me? And you would wait to hear, what the bear might say. So I decided to do this with this presence that I was feeling in the room. And I'm typing, who are you? And the answer that I get is Yeshua, which of course is the Hebrew name for Jesus. Well, that was a surprise. And I said, are you Yeshua ben Yosef? Or are you a part of me? Or are you a figment of my imagination? And Yeshua replied, yes. And that was the beginning of a series of conversations that have gone on to the present day. The way it happens for me now is that I will get there's a middle place that I'll talk about. In all through 2017, after I came home, and through 2018 and part of 2019, these conversations would begin by waking up at 1 or 2 in the morning with a very restless feeling. Not restless in the negative sense, but just physical, sensations and arousal and motion and knowing that I wasn't going to be able to get back to sleep. So what I proceeded to do, I would go into the living room and do some yoga stretches for about 10 minutes, and then I would meditate. And the meditations typically go on for about an hour until I can pretty much clear out the cobwebs. And then I will lie down on the sofa and take the iPhone and begin to type again. There are 2 primary entities, I don't know what to call them, that I connect with, Yeshua and a gentleman that when I asked him who he was, he said, what's in a name? I've had many names. And then he said, I think maybe I'd be of most use to you in my time as Shu Chi, in the old spelling HSUCHI, the new spelling XUQI, Shu Chi. And typically I know which one I'm going to be talking to, because I will have a sense that has some physical sensation that goes along with it. And it's usually in my heart chakra, except it's on the backside. And it's a feeling of mild pressure, like palm touching. Sometimes there's some upward motion to it. It's not unpleasant at all. It's just a signal. That's if it's Yeshua. If it's Shu Chi, it's more like a poke. And they're both interesting personalities. The third personality that Panyawati mentioned, this has no name. This is a presence that writes poetry, and the poetry just spews out, and there it is. I don't know much what more to say about that. So it's pretty equally divided conversations between these 3. But there is, and Panyawati asked me to talk about that, there is a sensation that precedes the arrival of this. And I was reading, this is page 177 in my book of chapter 9. It says, when you have freed yourself from all your mental formulations, you will find that which is not a mental formulation. The mind must cease to formulate before you can find the real. And I think that's what the preliminary yoga and meditation is all about. And during the meditation, I don't have any sense of a communication happening. It's not like I'm hearing stuff. It's not until I basically stop hearing anything of the inner chatter that I can be in a position to receive. I was thinking about. I was going to ask you, just take a few minutes. I'm going to give you just a sample of a brief one with Shu Chi in March of this year. So, and I don't recall. Usually, I have a journal entry that I open with, and I don't recall what this journal. There's no journal entry on this page, so the dialogue just starts up, and he starts out by asking me, "So, discovering you have been delusional, huh?" And I say, "I guess so. But is it delusion or just seeing a person's goodness and being shocked when you see another side of them?" And he said, "That's like asking if it's daytime or just that the sun is out." And I say, "Help me out here." And he says, "Oh, not until you've taken a crack at it." And I say, "Well, okay, let me try it this way. If I'm realistic about a person, I can enjoy their company and even their friendship. If they do something that I believe is hurtful, I might think, well, that's another side of my friend. Let's see what happens with that. Or I might say to them, hey, that sucks. Do you really want to stand behind that? And see what they do with it." And he says, "That's okay, but what's underneath those words?" And I say, "I guess it must be no expectations." And he says, "Yes, though I would say it's more like no demands. You don't insist that they be perfect." I say, "Okay." He says, but there's more still." And I say, "Like what?" And he says, "Think about Tao, T-A-O." And I say, "I'm lost. How do you mean?" He says, "Tao is always changing. If you are in Tao, you meet your friends change easily. For that one who is in Tao, change is no surprise. For another, established in Tao, you have all you need and therefore need not insist that your friend be a certain way for you to feel okay. There's no pressure on either of you." And I say, "That makes sense, but what if my friend's shadow is coming out? What if my friend's shadow coming out really has far-reaching consequences for me or others?" And he replies, "Well, you can always turn things in a different direction. We have that ability. We can argue, try to persuade, get the person to change their mind. But often the situation that feels so terrible is making an opening for something much better. When you see that happen enough, you're less quick to intervene." I say, "How do you know which is best?" He says, "You don't. But if you've been diligent in your cultivation, you'll have a growing sense of what's on the mark. Come on down here. I'll show you what I mean." And this is where it becomes visual. He leads me along a short path down to the river, a fairly narrow part of it, where a small sailing vessel is tied. He gets in and motions me to untie the boat and climb around. The boat is barely big enough for two. He says, "Okay, take these oars and row us to that bunch of trees up there." He points about 100 yards upstream. And I say, "That's going to be a tough row." And he says, "Just do it." I did as he said, rowing until I was out of breath and my muscles weak. He says, "There, see? Made it. Now, put the oars back in the boat. Watch this." He untied the sail, and the boat began to move forward against the current. He says, "I'm going to take us about the same distance, still headed against the current. The boat began to glide in what seemed like an effortless flow as he tacked toward his chosen point. It was quiet and easy, the only effort being the setting and resetting the sail and handling the rudder. He guided the boat back onto the shore, and we got out and sat down. He says, "Get it?" And I say, "Well, I don't know. I thought being in Tao was about going with the flow. Whether we were rowing or sailing, this boat was going against the flow." He says, "You see, that's an error that many people make. They think going with the flow is a passive thing. It's a receptive thing, but it's not a passive thing. Flow is a harmonious relationship with what is. There is a place for me and my wishes in that relationship if I cultivate it. I cultivate it in this case by learning how to set sail and tiller. I become skillful in that. The wind, the waves, and me, we have an understanding, a friendship. But what if one day there's no wind, and I have only my oars and the way the river is flowing? Am I abandoned, betrayed by the cursed wind? Is the wind showing its true colors? Should I have known better than to trust the goddamn wind?" And I say, okay, I see what you're driving at. I can see that it's silly to take the lack of wind personally. But if I'm set on getting somewhere, isn't it human to at least be disappointed that my plan has been delayed or maybe even thwarted? I can imagine even being angry about it, even though it's not rational. He says, "Oh, it's not hard to imagine. It is completely normal. But do you want to set your sights that low?" "What do you mean?" "Normal is where all the suffering is. When a person decides to begin the work of attuning himself to Tao, he lets normal fall by the wayside. He aspires to a higher standard. He doesn't require anyone or anything to be any particular way, especially to be consistent. He understands that his own and others' shortcomings will give him opportunities to achieve self-mastery. In every disappointment, every thwarted agenda, there is a master teacher behind the curtain orchestrating the possibility of his liberation." I say, "It's a lot to take in. I've heard this before." "Yes, you have. As long as there is life, there is the possibility to go beyond what you imagine you're capable of. If normal isn't working for you, perhaps you are called to something better." Well, I believe I've been on a path that leads away from normal for a long time, but there are times that I feel I'm starting all over again. Beginner's mind, huh? That's a tactful way of putting it. Tactful? You insult me, sir. Yes, no one would accuse you of that. I'm getting tired. Can we stop here? This has been very helpful, and I have a lot to reflect on. And he says, "You young people lack stamina. You should spend more time outside." "Oh, very well. Go get your beauty rest. Leave me to take care of this boat." "I'll help you with it. Basically just float back downstream, right?" "Yeah, in the flow. We can chill. Lazy man's Tao." We get back in the boat and head back to where we started this morning, with the wind behind us. I would be sore for a couple of days, and eternally grateful. So that's an example of what keeps me up at night, all hours. But what I'm curious about, and what I would invite you to consider. First of all, I'd be curious to know if anybody has experiences that are similar to this. I think there are certainly many ways for this to happen, and most of them can be completely nonverbal. But something to reflect on is the kind of cues that one can override uh, or dismiss or ignore that there may be a wisdom voice that's trying to get one's attention. I have a good friend who started doing Edgar Cayce meditations when he was a teenager, and this guy's amazing in terms of the level of wisdom that he had even back then. But he said I made a decision at that time that I was going to treat the subtle as real. I was going to treat the subtle as real. And I wonder, in my own case, how often I disregarded subtle cues of uh, wisdom voices in one form or another trying to get my attention, and had to get hit over the head with a driveway to be open to listen. Anyway, let me stop there. Thank you all for your kind attention. I guess we don't have much time left. Any questions or comments? Maureen.
Uh, I just want to thank you so much, Jim, for sharing how this all happens for you. It does sound very familiar. It doesn't happen to me regularly, but I've had 3 or 4 instances where I've had uh, visitations. I don't know what to call it. One was fascinating when Venerable Panawati was giving a Dharma talk here at my home, and this very tall being came from the back bedroom and stood right next to her, listening to her talk the whole time. And then when she did the dedication of merit, it walked away. And afterwards, I asked her, does Deepa do this sort of thing out of the body? Where she goes, that wasn't mine. That was something of yours. And that was one. And I've had several. I don't want to take our time to describe them all, but this really, uh, your sharing touched something in my heart that did a little shift that said, pay attention, Maureen, and don't be afraid. Pay attention. So thank you so much, Jim.
Thank you, Maureen. Anyone else? Okay.
Uh,
Anuari?
Jim,
oh, sorry.
I just wanted to ask, how long did it take before you decided that you were going to share that? I think maybe there's many people who want to speak up and just are not wanting to share. But I'm wondering, how long did you sit with saying, yeah, this is my experience and I'm ready to share this with others?
Uh, about 3 years. And then it came at the stimulus of my very persuasive wife. And I really struggled with it. I didn't want to. I felt very self-conscious about it. I didn't want to feel like I was influencing anybody, you know, and had some conversations about that, inner conversations about that. There was a limited group of people that we shared them with, and the response was, we want to see more. We want to see more because this was helpful. And so I began to get the feeling that, well, maybe there's a middle way here. You know, I don't want to be exhibitionistic about it, but at the same time, maybe I'm withholding something that can be of value to someone else. So I try to walk that middle way.
So even I used to call them gifts. So sometimes it comes, that word slips out. These gifts, but but truth has its own quality, and it finds its own mark, and it's mostly about us being able to get out of the way and really allow that free expression. And sometimes it um, whether we uh, think more highly of ourselves than we ought to think, or whether we don't think highly enough of ourselves, or it's just being, I try to think of like the trumpet, and how you have a trumpeter, somebody who blows that trumpet, but no matter how much he huffed and how much he puffed, without that, you know, um, it takes the Dharmakaya to bring that which is unsoundable into the realm of sound. And so that trumpet, has to be a good brassy instrument, and just being there and being the trumpet serves the perfect purpose. But if the trumpet didn't show up, there would be no way to take these things from the invisible realm into the realm. So it's mostly like just a willingness, and for that willingness to um, occur, so that wisdom can sound in the world. And it takes uh, that's a different kind of humility, a different kind of submission that's more like an emptiness. And so that's why the Buddha's constantly teachings are constantly pushing us to whatever concept of emptiness we can allow, that allows the fullness of manifestation to express in in the world, and without any thought of an I. And this is the process, and it's so um, um, excellent uh, in its unfoldment when it can happen, and it starts to override all of our other agendas, whatever self agendas we have. It starts to it starts to really, really crush those agendas. So sometimes we're used to working, even around spiritual matters. We're going to hang up now. Even around spiritual matters, we're used to working in our own strength. And that's all well and good. He'd already written a couple of books before, and they were good books. But now this stuff that's streaming now, I mean, it's a whole nother level, a whole nother layer for those, not only for those who have an ear to hear, but even for those of us who are the greatest simpletons. It's coming in a way that even a fool can understand. That's what I'm saying. That's the grace of all of this. If we can get out of the way more to allow the simple flow of wisdom, and water finds its own level, so it'll trickle to each person to the extent that it's needed. um, but for the soundness to reverberate in the phenomenal worlds, in the conditioned worlds, we need, to have the three bodies of truth. And that includes also, uh, uh, a body by which it can make an entrance into the world. So I want to thank you so much, Jim, for this. I know there's a lot of things on people's minds, and don't not to think things strange. Just keep a I don't know mind, you know. Maybe even I don't believe, we should just take that out of our vocabulary, because it doesn't matter whether we, believe or not. But if we just take that out, we'd leave more room for what is real to show up in a way that we can recognize it, and we can um, fulfill our greatest wishes in the world. So thank you all so much for coming on today. May you be well and happy and peaceful.